Our family moved into this area in 1881. My great-grandfather. He was one of three brothers that moved out here. They all settled here in the Bitterroot Valley. One of them down by Missoula, and two of them just south of Lolo on the west side. They ranched here and homesteaded a lot of this ground. My great-grandfather was probably one of the more successful ones. He was pretty lucky raising cattle and made more money than the other brothers, and homesteaded on a lot more ground and bought a lot of ground also. He married Virginia McLean from across the valley in McLean Creek. They were before homesteaders here. They came in the 1870s. It was open range then, and he married their daughter in 1886, I believe, when it was still territorial ground here before statehood in 1889. His name was David McClay. There was lots of people moving in the 1880s, 1890s here, homesteading. A lot of them didn't stay long, and then my great-grandfather would buy them out. At the height of, well, he owned all this ground until 1954 when he passed away. He had one son and four daughters. And we and my grandmother inherited this 4,000 acres, 4,400 acres on this side of the valley, on the east side, in 1954 from her father. The Grether place, which is 8 Mile, which we butt up against on the south side, was another ranch of about equal size. The McClay Ranch on the west side is about the same with the one with the ski area. And then they had a ranch up Lolo Creek, and most of the town of Lolo was the other ranch. So that all got split up. But my grandmother, she inherited this in 54, but they bought 1,000 acres on the west side of the Bitterroot in 1923. My grandmother and grandfather both graduated from the University of Montana in 1917. She was in the first class of women that graduated from U of M in economics. And my grandfather graduated in finance. He grew up in Clyde Park, down in the Shields Valley, and went to school in Livingston, and then came to University of Montana. Anyway, they met there. They were married and went down and lived in Clyde Park for a few years, and then decided to sell that ranch. And they bought 1,000 acres from her father. I think it was for $10,000, which was a lot of money in those days. But that's how they got their start in the Bitterroot. And then we ranched over there until 1954, and then they inherited this piece. And that's when they fenced. It had no fences until then. It was all fenced in 1954 to 56 and separated all these different ranches. It was all open until then. Most of them were cedar posts in those days. They were all hand-dug fences. So it was a lot of work doing that. That was about 17 miles of fence just to go around. Wow. It took several men, a couple of years to do that. In 1881, there probably wasn't really any of this. The original homestead in 1881 was on the west side. It's actually right over there where Schroeder Brothers implement store is over there. There was a log homestead right there. And then they started over there and they acquired all of this ground, basically from the south side of 8 Mile Creek, all the way to basically to Sam McClay's place, which is the place up here at the north here. They basically had all of this. It was all open range, yeah, and they all operated on that. My great-grandfather was 18. Yeah, and they came out of Pennsylvania, where they'd lived. The McClays came over with William Penn. They were surveyors, and they had quite a history in Pennsylvania, but these brothers, they wanted to come west, so his 2 older brothers came first, and then he came a couple years later. To tell you the truth, I think his father was a judge, but I'm not positive of that. There was lots of McClays that were judges and senators and when they lived in Pennsylvania. But he was 18, he came out here, and I think they stopped here basically because his brothers had stopped here. And then he met Virginia McLean, and they got hitched not too long after that. They had a lot of difficult times, especially my grandparents and great-grandparents. Agriculture then was way more boom and bust. My great-grandfather was broke one year and he'd have lots of money the next. It just depended on the market cycles. I think in 1918, right before the First World War, he was a very wealthy man, and by 1923 he was completely broke. Got started again, went good until the Depression was pretty well lost the entire place. It was all mortgaged to the bank, to the Farm Home Administration, I think. And I think it was 1933 or 34. The bankers were coming to take the ranch away, and I'm trying to think his name, McLeod, he owned the Mercantile in Missoula. He paid the note off for us, because and for several other ranches also, because that was his means of making a living too. You know, if the ranches all went broke, then he was going to go broke. So he paid it off, several of the Grass Valley ranches, ours, and then we just paid him off, because when times got better, which was pretty soon after the Depression, especially at the beginning of the war, they needed, commodity prices went right back up. So that's basically how the ranch was saved in the 30s. Yeah, they were civic-minded people. I mean, they were well known. My great-grandfather McClay was, of course, you know, a big landowner, so everyone pretty well knew him. I can't really tell you much of his civics stuff, but my grandfather was in the legislature, started up a lot of conservation plans and agencies in Montana. He was a starting member of the conservation districts in Montana, worked with the governors and was really a well-known man, especially in the political end of things. He wasn't in politics very much, but he did a lot of political stuff. He's won a lot of awards for conservation, and And then my father went just kind of the other way. He was just pretty well stuck with ranching. He didn't do so much with the political end of things or the conservation agency kind of things. And then when I graduated from college, I took over from where my grandfather was on those boards, and I've been on the conservation boards and the Farm Service Agency boards ever since my grandfather got off in '74.